All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to be looking at a seriously dramatic shift in early 20th century America. We're talking about tracing the absolute roller coaster of a journey from a mostly isolated agrarian society to a massive mechanized powerhouse. And the best part? It's all captured through some of the very earliest motion picture cameras. So to really set the stakes here, consider this thought. In the early 20th century, America was a world of limited horizons. Just transport yourself back there for a second. Imagine a world where just a quick trip to the market on a muddy road could be a genuinely dangerous or sometimes completely impossible journey. You were literally locked to the land you lived on. A heavy rainstorm? Yeah, your family might be cut off from the outside world for weeks. The geographical boundaries of your whole life, where you worked, who you married, where you grew old, well, they were completely dictated by the weather and, frankly, the physical endurance of a horse. So let's kick things off with Chapter 1, America Before the Machine. It's wild to think about the stark contrast between the painfully slow pace of that rural life and the absolute hustle of the growing cities. Out on the farm, everyday life meant brutal, back-breaking manual labor from dawn till dusk for both people and animals. Isolation was pretty much the default. But then, you look at the city, and it's a totally different universe. You've got the fast-paced energy of Pennsylvania Avenue, the loud, crowded markets at Faneuil Hall, and the screech of elevated trains in New York. Back then, the only real way to get anywhere fast was the train. But here's the catch. You could only go exactly where those iron tracks took you. All that vast space in between, still painfully slow to cross. And just look at the unbelievable scale of progress happening in those urban hubs. 60 stories high. Down in New York City, the Woolworth Building was a towering monument to this new ambition. I mean, it was the tallest building in the entire world at the time. To your average citizen back then, seeing a skyscraper pierce the clouds was basically science fiction coming to life. It was a massive signal. A nation engineering its way up to the sky with such incredible prowess was inevitably going to explode horizontally, pushing all that intense urban innovation right out across the muddy countryside.
Which brings us to our second chapter, documenting a changing nation.
Now, the real catalyst for bridging the gap between those towering cities and the isolated farms was, of course, Henry Ford. As the quote goes, his tools were common sense, ingenuity, and perseverance. That mechanical genius was the exact spark needed to lift the grueling workload off human shoulders and slap it onto combustion engines. But there's a fascinating paradox here. Ford was literally inventing the very machines that would destroy the old horse-drawn world, yet he was desperate to preserve a record of that world before it vanished. Driven by this intense nostalgia, he actually set up a motion picture department right inside his massive Highland Park plant back in April 1914. It was a totally groundbreaking move for historical preservation, ensuring we had cameras rolling to catch this rapid evolution in real time. And thanks to that incredible foresight, the cameras captured this absolute magical collision between the old frontier and modern science. It wasn't just boring footage of gears and assembly lines. It was a living record of the icons of the era. We're talking footage of the legendary naturalist John Burroughs hanging out with horticulture expert Luther Burbank, who, by the way, was actually experimenting with edible, spineless cactus at the time. Crazy, right? And imagine how surreal it must have been to film a 71-year-old Buffalo Bill Cody, the literal embodiment of the Wild West, still out touring with his circus, right alongside electric age pioneers like Thomas Edison and political titans like Theodore Roosevelt. It's just a breathtaking who's who of a nation caught perfectly in transition. Moving right along to Chapter 3, Mobilizing for the Great War. So when America entered the First World War in 1917, that global conflict acted like throwing rocket fuel on mass production. The American industrial machine pivoted so fast it would give you whiplash. The exact same assembly line techniques used for consumer cars were ruthlessly retooled for the war effort. First off, factories just suddenly started churning out these famous Liberty aircraft engines. Second, over at Ford's sprawling new River Rouge plant, they were literally riveting together sleek, anti-submarine Eagle boats. And third, this one is just a stroke of absolute, slightly absurd genius. They actively developed and tested small battlefield tanks powered by 2 Model T engines. Seriously, just picture the engine meant for a quiet Sunday family drive suddenly powering a war machine through the thick mud of Europe. Now, after they ironed out the initial bugs on those small tanks, and yeah, the archival footage definitely shows them slipping and sliding around in the mud during early tests, the government didn't just ask for a handful of them. No, they placed a staggering, mind-blowing order for 15,000. 15,000. That single number perfectly captures the awe-inspiring power of the American assembly line when pointed directly at national defense. It pretty much proved that mass production was going to be the deciding factor in global conflicts. But hey, this rapid mechanization didn't just change the battlefield. It completely rewired the actual fabric of American society. The cameras were rolling to document the dawn of the modern workforce dynamic that we all recognize today. With men shipping overseas, women stepped out of the domestic sphere and into the workforce in absolutely massive numbers to fill those gaps. They were right there on the noisy factory floors making footballs and hats and taking over vital municipal jobs like rapidly sorting the mail down at the post office. This was a massive, permanent societal shift caught right on film, proving that you really can't have industrial evolution without cultural evolution going hand in hand.
All right, let's shift gears to Chapter 4, A Nation on Wheels.
Once the war wrapped up, the country fully transitioned away from those muddy, isolated dirt paths and started building a connected network of paved highways. And over at the Highland Park plant, the pace of production hit an absolutely mind-blowing milestone. They were rolling a brand new, fully built Model T off the end of that assembly line every 10 seconds. Let that sink in for a second. One car every 10 seconds. Suddenly, the automobile wasn't some exotic luxury just for the ultra-rich. Almost every working-class family could actually afford one. It completely democratized travel, shrinking the map of America, and totally changing how the average family spent their weekends. Because you see, travel wasn't just about the heavy chore of hauling crops to the market anymore. It was suddenly about leisure. The car birthed entirely new cultural habits. Think the classic Sunday drive or these glamorous cross-country camping trips. In fact, consider this surreal setup, often called the ultimate camping trip. You've got some of the wealthiest, most powerful men on the planet just roughing it together in the Great Smoky Mountains. You have Henry Ford chopping wood for a workout, Thomas Edison catching a nap under a tree, tire magnate Harvey Firestone giving advice, and sitting President Warren G. Harding literally rolling up his sleeves to swing an axe. It's incredible. The car essentially turned the vast, untouchable American wilderness into one giant accessible playground.
And then all this mechanization quickly circled right back around to transform the very rural farms we started our story with. That grueling traditional life of manual plowing, totally overhauled. Modernized farms started using these newly affordable Fords and tractors instead of workhorses, drastically speeding up the harvest and making everything way more efficient. Plus, the miracles didn't stop at the barn door. They came right inside the house. Electricity finally brought the sheer luxury of running water to rural homes. Imagine how utterly life-changing it must have felt for a farmer to just turn a tap in the kitchen, instead of making freezing, endless trips to a hand pump outside. The brutal isolation of agrarian life was pretty much vanishing overnight.
Which leads us to our final chapter, Taking to the Skies. When you step back and look at this rapid evolution on a timeline, the sheer speed of it all is honestly breathtaking. We start in 1914, with Ford setting up a film department to capture a nation still largely bogged down on muddy roads. Skip to 1917, and boom, massive factory mobilization for the war and a huge boom in paved highways across the states. Right after the war, we hit that insane peak industrial rhythm of a new Model T every 10 seconds. And then, seamlessly rolling into the 1920s, the camera catches a slim young pilot named Charles Lindbergh landing his gleaming silver plane at the Ford airport. In basically a decade, the limits of time and space weren't just broken by cars, they were practically erased by scheduled flights that could take you anywhere up in the clouds. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. We just watched a whole society go from horse-drawn buggies in the mud to airplanes soaring through the sky in under 2 decades. And we get to witness it all today simply because a few visionaries decided it was important enough to capture on film. If preserving the past really does mirror the accomplishments of the people who paved the way to our future, how are our own rapid technological shifts, like the explosion of artificial intelligence or the commercialization of space, going to be documented today? As we hurtle into our own era of dizzying, rapid change, how are we capturing our present moments to inspire the next generation? Think about that for a bit. I really hope this explainer gave you a striking new appreciation for exactly how fast our world can evolve.